Hello, I'm Blake Rudis with EverydayHDR.com and HDRinsider.com, and today I want to talk to you about Topaz Clean. Now, I had no idea what Topaz Clean was until I got the whole suite of plugins and started to experiment with it, and I found that it is actually a very useful plugin that has a lot to offer any artist, whether they're trying to do something artistic or they're trying to be a portrait photographer with those nice, clean portrait faces. Now, as a professional photographer, when people come to you to get their pictures taken, they are expecting that. They're expecting that nice, crisp, clean look to their face, and it's up to us to get that. Now, sometimes it can be pretty difficult, and people take it way too far sometimes. So what I'm going to show you today is how to use Topaz Clean to clean up the smooth transitions of skin on faces, and also how to use Topaz Clean to make some really cool artistic effects on another photograph here. So the first thing I'm going to do before I do anything, Command or Control J to duplicate that background layer so that we can do this edit on something else. I'm going to go to Filter, Topaz Labs, and Topaz Clean. Now, in the Topaz Clean, on the left-hand side, you're going to see all these different presets. You have your different collections here, your cartoon, your crisp, your skin, your stylized edges collection, and you can see that you can do some pretty creative effects with these. And you can also go into that skin collection and make some pretty smooth transitions of skins. Now, I'm not going to use any presets because I want to show you what's happening over here on the right hand side when we actually start to do some of this stuff. So I'm going to just go ahead and knock all of these down, and I want to show you what happens as you start to manipulate these. So the power behind any one of these modules over here is going to be like this one, strength. Nothing will happen to this photograph until the strength is up. You can move the threshold and the radius all you want, but nothing's going to happen to the photograph unless that strength is up. The same with the edges. Nothing's going to happen with the edges unless the accent is up. Then you can move the radius and sharpness independently, and then the same goes for the texture. So the clean module is where we're pretty much going to get all of our smoothness and the smooth transitions on our skin. So you see when we move it all the way to something like 8, it's not really doing anything right now because we don't have our threshold up. So we have to move our threshold up in order to get that as well. So if we move our threshold up and we move this to a strength of 8, we're going to get a really cartoon-esque looking photograph, and I don't want that. So I'm going to bring that down to about 1 and keep that threshold somewhere in the mid-range, like below 1.0. So about 0.6 for this photograph will work, and then I'm going to bring the radius up. So right now I've got a really very clean photograph. You know, if I zoom in here to that 200%, you can see that I've knocked out pretty much all facial detail in this photograph also, which that's not what I want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the texture portion here, and this area will determine how much texture, the original texture in the photograph, is preserved during your process. So I'm going to move up that texture to about the midway area and see what that does. It doesn't do anything obviously because I haven't moved my boost or my size up. So we move the boost up to something like 1 real quick just to see what that'll do. If I move it higher, you can see that it starts to look almost like a golf ball the more I move that up, that puckered effect on the face, and I don't really want that because that's not natural. So I'll just go ahead and move that to about 1.6. Now all of these modifications you're seeing here are pretty much subjective to the photograph that you're working on. But this will get us a good preset that we can use later. So then I'll increase the size of that texture also. So here we have our original photograph right here, and now here's our processed version. Okay, so you can see that a lot of skin smoothing has been done on this, but there's still some of that pucker effect. So let me move that texture down just a little bit. Okay, so right now we have a pretty good baseline. I haven't destroyed any of the detail in the photograph. It's obviously smoothed out a lot of the detail, but it's not to the point that it's unusable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a preset for this. I'm going to go over here to the little save option. I'm going to save this as Blake's Smooth Skin. So I want to show you that you can save your own presets. So what that told me was that already existed because I already saved it before. So if I click on any one of these presets, I can now use that for the future. If I click this little star over here on the left hand side, that'll make it a favorite. So if I go into my favorites, you can see that right now Blake's Smooth Skin is the only favorite I have in my Topaz Clean. Now if I go ahead and press OK on this, it's going to open up on that new layer. So if we zoom in here, we can see what we've done to our photograph, and it's pretty good. Now one of the things that I want to air some caution to you with is that if you do any skin smoothing, one of the things that you really want to pay attention to are eyes, the bottoms of noses, and lips. So I'm going to go ahead and make a mask on this. And I'm just going to paint in black over those areas because I want to preserve those areas. I want to make sure that those areas don't get the detail taken away from them, because that's going to be our telltale sign when anyone looks at this that there was a lot of work that was done here. Now also in hair, you can also see it in hair too. So let's go up to the hair and go ahead and mask out by painting black on that hair so that I can start to resurrect some of that area too, so I don't affect that with the Topaz Clean. So here is our before image, and now here is our after image. It's very subtle. I mean, move in a little bit closer. It's very subtle. It's subtle for a reason, because we want to smooth out that skin, but we don't want it to be so smooth that it looks fake. Alright, so that's the first thing you can do with Topaz Clean. The next thing I want to show you with Topaz Clean is how you can make artistic effects in a photograph. Now, I just took this photograph the other day, and I liked it, but it was too much. What I was trying to do was blend two different techniques together, and it didn't really work out so well. It's really contrasty, and it's not something that I really like, but I brought it into Topaz Clean just to see if there was something I could do with it. So let me go ahead and go to Filter, Topaz Labs, and Topaz Clean. Actually, before I do that, always Command or Control J, duplicate that background so that we can have it on that background layer. So now I'm going to go to Filter, Topaz Labs, and Topaz Clean. So what I'm going to do now is make an artistic effect for this. Now if we go back and we look at this, we had our clean part that would make those cartoony effects. So let me go ahead and move that all the way up to 8 and see what happens here. I'll leave my threshold the same because I actually like what's going on here. I took a lot of the detail in this photograph and just kind of smoothed it over. So I really like what's going on with that. Let me move the radius up just a little bit. So one of the things that I didn't go into too much in the last one was the edges. Alright, so the edges in the scene. This is where we get these really cool artistic effects. So if I move the accent edges all the way over to the right, you're going to start to see these really curly Q looking effects in the trees in the background. Now that's way too much. So I'm going to move that down to about 2. And it's going to do its processing. And then I'm going to move the radius up. See what happens with that. Now this does do a lot of taxing on your CPU, so it might take some time for this stuff to render as you make these adjustments. So you just have to bear with it. Anytime you get into this stuff, it gets pretty crazy. Now, one of the things you might have seen this before, it's called fractal art. You might get that fractal look when you're using these edges too, because it curls the details around and makes them look like this. And I'm going to bring the sharpness all the way down, because what you're going to see with the sharpness is the edges of those curly cues, they really stand out when the sharpness is up. So when you bring the sharpness down, it actually looks more like paint strokes. And then with the texture, let's see if we can move the texture up just a little bit, see what happens when we resurrect some of that texture that we lost in those background areas. So that looks pretty good, actually. I'm going to leave that. Let's move the size up a little bit of that texture, just to get a little bit more of that texture in there. Alright, so I'm going to press OK. Now, I like what's happening here, but I don't want it to happen to the entire photograph, because when it happens to the entire photograph, it just looks like a filter that I placed on something. So what you can do is actually, you can go to the original layer, the original background layer. I'm going to go to Select, go to Color Range, and then go to Midtones. So all I'm going to do is apply this effect to the midtones. So when I click back on that layer that I just created with Topaz Clean and make a mask on it, it will automatically mask out everything else except for the midtones. So all we did was apply that fractalized look to our midtones. So here's the before and here's the after. It's subtle, you know, it's just enough so that it creates an artistic effect, but not so much that we've actually destroyed our photograph here. So if I move the density down on that mask too, you can see I can start bringing some of that area back. With actually, if you look at the mask itself here, what I'm doing is I'm adjusting the density of how dark that mask is. So at 100% it's pure black, but as I start to move it down, it starts to to turn gray, which in turn is affecting the opacity of that layer. So if I press Alt or Option on that mask again, I'm not seeing that mask anymore. I can see that if I move the density down, I can bring more of that fractalized look back because I went in there in the first place to do something. So here's before, here's the after. So you can do some really cool things. If you were to print this on canvas, it would look pretty cool. It would look like a painting. I've done it several times, and they actually look pretty cool. So again, I'm Blake Grudis with EverydayHDR.com and HDRinsider.com, and today I talked about Topaz Clean and how you can use it to clean up portraits, and how you can also use it to make a really cool artistic effect.